Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Tyranny, How Fiction Became Our Reality. This is our 7-part series, and in this episode, we are all the way to episode number 5, and we are shifting from surveillance and control and other dark government issues, and instead this week, we are diving deep into love and relationships in dystopian societies. Today, we'll explore the haunting nature of love in George Orwell's 1984 and the empty, superficial connections in Huxley's Brave New World. How are these relationships controlled, manipulated, and ultimately weaponized by oppressive regimes? And what, if anything, does that say about our world today, where algorithms and dating apps push us toward a reality we're not quite ready to face in true honesty? But today's topic, relationships. Yeah, I know this doesn't happen on my podcast very much, but relationships, they're beautiful, they're messy, they're complicated, and sometimes they'll make you wish you could skip the whole human connection thing and move into a cabin in the woods. Well, that's kidding, kind of kidding, but seriously, what is it about love, friendships, and all the other connections we form that make them so very central to who we are as human beings? And more importantly, why do governments in dystopian fiction, and maybe even in real life, seem hell-bent on controlling or dismantling them? Before we dive into the bleak worlds of relationships in 1984, Brave New World, where love either gets crushed under the boot of tyranny or replaced with casual flings or some sort of soma pill, some drug-induced stupor, let's take a moment to reflect on why relationships matter in the first place. And I know sometimes this might seem elementary, but why do we care so much about these connections? And what happens in our world when we don't have them? First of all, I think we can say easily that relationships, they're vital to our emotional well-being. You think about the last time your life went sideways, when it all went crazy for you. Who did you turn to? Maybe your best friend, your partner, your mom, your dad. That's what relationships are. They are a support system. They're the people who remind you you're not alone, even when sometimes you feel the loneliest, even when it feels like you're drowning. It's like having a life jacket. Without it, the world becomes a much darker, a much more lonely place. Orwell knew this very well. In 1984, when we look at our character, Winston, it's not that he's just isolated physically, but even more so, he's isolated emotionally. There's no one he can trust. There's no one to lean on. The party had surgically removed every chance for him to make authentic connections. And guess what? That makes Winston and everyone else so much easier to control. When you've got no one to vent to share your dreams or your fears, you're vulnerable. And in the case of dystopian literature, the party in 1984, they loved and wanted everybody to be completely vulnerable. Another huge benefit for people to have robust relationships in their lives is happiness and fulfillment. Beyond just being there for us during a breakdown, relationships, they in general make us happier. Research backs this up time and time again that people with strong social connections, they're less stressed, they're more content, and they are less likely to be on anxiety or antidepressant drugs. This seems obvious, don't you think? But people with strong relationships, they feel, alive. They feel connected. And isn't that what we're all chasing really in the end? To feel like life is worth living because someone out there somewhere cares about us and we care about them back. But contrast that with, say, Huxley's Brave New World. Sure, everyone's happy on the surface because they're sedated. They're sedated by pleasure and distraction, but there's no real connection. They've got the soma, that pill we've been talking about. They have their orgies. They have their superficial fun, but they lack what gives life its meaning. There's no depth. There's no true bonds. No one has to deal with the messiness of love or the heartache or rejection. But they don't get joy. They have no real intimacy. They're all just floating like over-medicated ghosts with perfect skin. Another thing, relationships give us identity and they give us self-understanding. Relationships, they are not just emotional band-aids. They're how we learn about ourselves. Think about it. You get into an argument with a friend and suddenly you realize, wow, or hopefully sometimes you realize, wow, I might actually be a little self-centered on this, or I'm wrong, or maybe you're in a relationship and you start to see your strengths and your weaknesses in ways you hadn't before. Other people are mirrors for us. They reflect back the good, they reflect back the bad, and sometimes the downright ugly. Without relationships, you're stuck staring at your own self. And that's a very microscopic, very minimal view that does not give you room to grow. Winston in 1984 experiences this firsthand with Julia. You know, that's the woman he met at work, and he kind of starts a relationship. Eventually, he even falls in love with her. But before he met her, he's nothing more than just this passive cog in the party machine. He's just sort of existing. But through their affair, he rediscovers his desires and his capacity for rebellion. It ignites passion inside of him that he thought was dead. It's like he wakes up, briefly anyway, because of the connection that those two share. It's not that their relationship, when you read the novel, is some grand love story, but it serves as a mirror showing Winston that, hey, I'm human. I can still have feelings. And it also highlights even deeper what the party had taken away from him. Another thing relationships do is relationships give us a shared identity. And it's not just about that self-reflection. When you're in a relationship, whether it's with a partner or a group of friends or your family, you're part of something bigger than just you. You know, when you're a child and you're 2 years old, and if you see a child at 2, the entire world, they believe, revolves around them. Everything and the only thing that matters is themselves. But as you get older and as you develop, you start to realize that there are things bigger than just you. It's a collective identity, a we instead of an I or a me. And that we is what gives us purpose. It's what keeps us grounded in a world that's constantly pulling us in a million different directions. In 1984, the party shatters this collective identity intentionally. It strips away the bonds between people, even between parents and children. Everyone is alone all the time, even when you're in a crowd. The only we that matters is the party. And on the flip side, in Brave New World, relationships exist. Sure, they're there, but they're shallow. They're hollow. Everyone belongs to everyone else. And it all sounds great until you realize that it means no one belongs to anyone, really, and there's no we at all. In this type of a world where the only collective is directed towards a government or an ideal of a political party, it's a very dangerous world, and the powers that be would love these relationships, this shared identity of humans, to be shattered. Another key thing is physical health and vitality. Here's a fun fact. People and again, this is all data backed. You can research it all you want. But people in strong, supportive relationships, they live longer. That's right. Love, connection, friendships are basically the best multivitamin you're ever going to take. They lower your blood pressure, they boost your immune system, and they keep you from getting sick. Seriously, relationships are a literal lifesaver. That's good for the body and not just the soul. But what happens when you take those relationships away? Well, Orwell's dystopia happens. People become shell of their former selves. They become isolated. They become disconnected. They become easier to manipulate. The party doesn't want you healthy and independent and strong. It wants you weak, compliant, and controllable. The physical toll of loneliness, and if some of you have ever suffered from this, you know how bad it is. It can really break you down, not just mentally, but also physically. Plus, people in good relationships, they tend to pick up healthier habits. You're more likely to go for a run if, say, you have a partner or friend group into fitness. Or you stop eating fast food because your friends keep dragging you to new organic places across town. Relationships, positive, nurturing relationships, they push you to be a better version of yourself. And without them, we're more likely to self-destruct. Or at the very least, eat that extra slice of pizza at midnight without a second thought. Also, people with strong relationships are integrated socially, and they are integrated culturally with their community. Here's where it gets interesting. Relationships aren't just about you personally. They're about how we, as a group, collectively, learn to function in a society that's healthy and growing and vibrant. It's through relationships that we learn values, we learn our customs, we learn our traditions. Every friendship you have, every family dinner, every awkward first date is a lesson to you in how the world works. If you remove that, you remove a big part of our human experience. In both Orwell and Huxley's dystopias, those lessons, they're hijacked. They're taken away. They're removed. The party in 1984 rewrites history and crushes culture to ensure loyalty to only one thing, and that's to Big Brother. In Brave New World, the old cultural values are replaced with just this mindless pursuit of pleasure and material things. The result? You end up with a world where relationships either serve the system or are rendered meaningless, mocked, and removed. And with real cultural ties, people retain a sense of who they are. But when you take them away, you and I lose our identity of things that bind us together. And then finally, relationships build communities. They're the glue that holds society together. And without them, communities crumble. They fight amongst themselves. People become isolated. And isolation breeds fear, suspicion, anger. And eventually, if a community and collectively as communities break down more and more, you end up in what we see in those novels we're reading, 1984 and Brave New World, where a totalitarian state becomes everything that is needed for the quote-unquote community. They know, those people in power, that if people unite, they're stronger. If they remain isolated, they're easier to manipulate. Do not think for 1 second that politicians on the left or the right don't intentionally attempt to divide you from people who don't think like you. Because once you are isolated into a bubble of people who only think like you, the potential for that community to break down increases, and it increases the power of the group who is telling you the other side is bad, evil, nasty, and horrible. It is a very dangerous, manipulative game. I mean, I'm not dropping brand new revelations here. I mean, I think at the core, we all get it. Relationships, they're not just nice to have. They're essential to our emotional, physical, and cultural survival. And that's precisely why Totalitarian regimes, whether in fiction or in reality, do everything they can to control or destroy them. Love, connection, intimacy, working together. They're all very dangerous to those people in power, because if people care about each other, they might just start questioning the system. And when people care for each other, they don't need Big Brother. They don't need a Republican. They don't need a Democrat. They don't need a huge government to take care of them. And that solid, meaningful relationships outside of government, my friends, is the last thing any big government or dictator in a dystopian novel would ever want to happen. Now, let's get into the juicy stuff. What happens when love becomes a political act? How do Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World twist and subvert human relationships to maintain control? And we're about to dive into this. And once again, at this point, I'm just going to say one more time that inside the show notes, the parts of the novel that I'm discussing here today, follow along. I know I sound like a broken record every podcast I say it, but if you really want to understand this stuff, dive into it and read it for yourself. You'll get a whole lot out of it. But let's start with 1984 and a world in which the party outlaws love, literally outlaws love, intimacy, and trust. In Orwell's 1984, the party doesn't just control the public's lives of its citizens, it invades the private sphere where real love lives. The goal of the party is to completely subvert the very concept of love and loving relationships between people. Whether that would be an intimate relationship, familial relationship, or just friendly relationships with other human beings. Winston's relationship with Julia in the novel is really fascinating. It's very obviously, on the one hand, an act of rebellion. It's a desperate attempt to carve out one tiny little private space where he can just be with another human being, free from the gaze of Big Brother. And what is their love really? It's an illusion. It's a fleeting passion doomed to fail, because in this world, the party has outlawed any genuine connection. Their world together was a dream. It was fleeting moments of just being human in intimate contact with one another. And the foreboding words that describe this relationship, that they both ultimately knew this was just going to be a train wreck that was going to crash, because always Big Brother was watching. And as it says inside the novel there, quote, they could only meet in secrecy and communicate in whispers, as if their very words would betray them, end quote. Here Orwell reveals the futility of true love in a society where even the act of love is an act of rebellion. It's subversion. It's not affection. Winston and Julia's relationship, it initially seemed to offer some hope, like there was a glimmer of humanity in this mechanical, this regimented existence, but it's also ultimately just another tool of control. They believe that their illicit affair can protect them in some way from this party's grip. Yet Orwell shows us that intimacy, just another battlefield where the state would exercise power over them. Here's another quote for you. Quote, their embrace had been a battle, the climax of victory. It was a blow struck against the party. It was a political act. In this moment of vulnerability, the physical contact offered them a sense of freedom, a fleeting connection to something real in a world that felt entirely false. And for just a moment, they were not just party members or rebels, but human beings seeking solace in one another. End quote. That passage underscores how their relationship, built mainly on rebellion, momentarily fulfills this deep yearning that all humans have for connection in a very dehumanized world. It's through each other that they briefly reclaim their humanity. And in 1984, Orwell doesn't just control what people do. The system doesn't just control them. He goes straight for the heart. I mean, literally, love, that personal, messy, incredible thing isn't safe from Big Brother. Winston and Julia's relationship feels like this rebellious breath of fresh air. For just one tiny little moment, it's like they found a crack in the wall where they can escape the party's grip. But here's the kicker. Their love is fragile. It's just a flicker of humanity that's quickly snuffed out by that ever-present surveillance. Even when they're together, whispering to each other, Big Brother's always lurking in the background. It's always waiting to pounce. And Orwell crushes any romantic notion that love could thrive in this nightmare. The party doesn't just control your actions, it's after your very emotions too. And Winston and Julia's affair, passionate as it is doomed. And serves a very harsh reminder that true intimacy doesn't stand a chance in a world like this. Sure, they're free in each other's arms, but Orwell lets us know, well, spoiler alert, that's just an illusion. What did they think was rebellion? Yeah, the party's got that covered too. In 1984, even when love is a battleground, and sadly, the house, the system, it always wins, and we'll be talking about the conclusion on that later on in another episode. Now, Orwell's world is one of fear and repression, as we've been talking about. But let's shift gears to Huxley's Brave New World, where relationships are disposable, they're trivial, and they're utterly devoid of any level of depth. In this society, people are conditioned to see love as a frivolous inconvenience from birth. In fact, they're encouraged to have multiple superficial relationships. The idea of monogamy or emotional depth to any relationship, that's unhealthy, even dangerous. That's what they're trained in Brave New World. A great quote from Huxley's Brave New World that captures this superficial, pleasure-driven nature of relationships is explained this way when Mustafa Mund explained the triviality of relationships and the science behind it that they were using. Quote, "But everyone belongs to everyone else," he concluded, citing the hypnopaedic proverb. The students nodded, emphatically agreeing with the statement which upwards of 62,000 repetitions in the dark had made them accept. Not merely as true, but as axiomatic, self-evident, utterly indisputable. But after all, Lenina was protesting. It's only about 48 hours since I've seen him, and I certainly don't see why I should have to put up with 2 nights of nobody, end quote. This commentary highlights how in Brave New World relationships are fleeting. They're based on hedonism, sexual desires, materialistic pleasures. There's no loyalty whatsoever. There's no deep connection. People are just conditioned to view each other as interchangeable parts, driven purely by pleasure and convenience. Intimacy to them is just merely another form of entertainment, sort of like sitting down and Netflix binging on an evening. Lenina, one of the central characters, embodies this philosophy. She has countless partners and literally has no desire for anything more profound than the surface level physical and sexual interactions. The very concept of a long-term relationship or love is completely and utterly foreign to her. Everything she needs, she can get herself. She doesn't need anybody to fulfill anything for herself. She has her drugs, she can have sex when she wants it, and that's all she needs, and she can go shopping and buy things. On the other hand, Bernard Marx, interesting character in Brave New World, he's seeking something more meaningful. But ultimately, he's just punished for this. He's punished for wanting emotional depth. It's the antithesis of love, where connection has been sacrificed for ease, convenience, and superficial pleasures. Now, in one sense, it should seem obvious why this dystopian world of Brave New World is such a stunted view of humanity. Still, I mean, let me just discuss why in this novel for Bernard, so brutally painful, and for certain, anyone raised outside of the world state would find this cultural norm appalling. Here are some reasons why these relationships, they fall short of anything embodying true humanity. The lack of intimacy. Superficial relationships, sure, for some people at some points in their life, they think, oh, this is great. These superficial interactions. I avoid all vulnerability. I avoid all openness required for deep emotional bonds. I don't have to think very deeply. And, without sharing personal thoughts, fears, and aspirations, people just, they miss the opportunity to understand and connect. But it also makes life super easy, which in the long run, it's not a good thing. That lack of intimacy is a horrific thing. It stunts your growth. Another thing, it's very transactional in nature. When we look at the world state, those relationships revolve around immediate needs or desires, such as physical satisfaction or convenience, rather than mutual emotional support. This transactional approach just prevents the formation of meaningful, enduring bond. I mean, when you're 2, as I referenced earlier, yeah, it is all about you. But when you become a grown human being, it's not all about you. And the most deepest, meaningful things in your life, if you try and outline them, very few of them are about your just very simple pleasures that you do just for you all the time and nobody else. Doesn't work like that. Another thing that they have when you look at the world state is this limited empathy and understanding. Superficial relationships rarely provide space for empathy and human compassion. In a world without it, individuals, they don't seek to even care or to understand or share each other's feelings, thoughts, and emotions. It's just a lack of genuine concern or active listening. And it hinders the development of compassionate, supportive relationships. And I think we see a lot of this lack of empathy in our world today, all across the board. And I mean, this was just staple in Brave New World. Another one is inauthentic communication. I mean, we all have superficial conversations. You walking down a hallway at work. How you doing? You don't want the whole story of all the bad that happened. You just want to say, fine, how about you? Have a great day. Go on. I mean, sometimes superficial conversations are more a social construct than actually trying to get to know someone. But if all of your relations are inauthentic communication and you avoid topics, this is not a good thing. You can't cultivate any trust, mutual respect, understanding, intellectual growth when everything you do is inauthentic. Another thing, stagnation of personal growth. True human relationships encourage personal growth by providing support and encouragement and constructive feedback, and even receiving support, receiving encouragement, and receiving constructive feedback. See, superficial relationships, they don't care about any of this. They're looking for the short-term path to whatever's easy. But a deep relationship's going to seek so that you as a person will evolve and develop, which is the last thing the world state in Brave New World would have ever wanted in any way, shape, or form. Another one, missed opportunities for connection. We see in our society today so many people anxious, lonely, depressed. And by not engaging in meaningful interactions, individuals in superficial relationships, they miss out on so many rich experiences and challenges that contribute to personal and emotional development. And this stagnation limits their ability to build resilience to hard things, to build empathy and a deeper understanding of themselves and other people around them. So in summary, superficial relationships, they fall short of true humanity because they lack depth, they lack empathy, they lack personal growth. And these elements are just crucial for building meaningful connections and a thriving, vibrant community that enrich all the lives around and embody the essence of what it truly means to be human. Let's do a little comparison here, the role of these personal relationships in a controlled society. And let's compare 1984 and Brave New World. I think already you get the gist of it, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to drive home the point, in both 1984 and Brave New World, relationships are tools of control. The way they're controlled and the way they're manipulated are complete opposites. In Orwell's universe, love is dangerous. It has to be repressed because it threatens the party's total domination. Any genuine emotional bond, whether it's romantic or platonic, it creates this space where the party's ideology cannot fully penetrate. And so love is not allowed to flourish, not even for a moment. It has to be stamped out. Even family ties are undermined. With children, they're encouraged and they do spy on their own parents and turn them in, and their parents are even executed for it, and the children celebrate it. They're eliminating any type of loyalty in any relationship with anything but the state. In contrast, though, in Huxley's world, love is just neutered. It's dumbed down. It's dulled out. The system is encouraging relationships, but they only want meaningless ones. Meaningless relationships, because real emotional connections, that's bad. That would disrupt the consumer-driven hedonistic order. Emotional ties could lead to instability and dissatisfaction, and perhaps worst of all, personal growth. Oh my goodness, that the society couldn't control. So instead, what do? They drug everyone up. They let them have sex with anybody they want to have, fulfill any physical desire that crosses their mind, pump them full of drugs, send them out shopping and buying things and keeping them materialistic so that they are controlled that way instead of with a boot on the head. Both of these societies, through opposite ends of the emotional spectrum, they come to the same conclusion, though, in the end. Love is a threat to the system, and you're either going to crush it, like 1984, or you're going to make it irrelevant, like Brave New World. As a side note, this is a late, great George Carlin. Such an amazing comedian. Who once did a bit asking a really simple question. And he's on stage asking this question. It says, isn't it strange, the people that get assassination attempts against them? If you could find one characteristic that unites them all, as George Carlin says, it's these public figures are about unity and to love one another and bringing people together. Isn't that crazy? When you really stop and think about it in the past, and Carlin's been dead now for, goodness, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years now. I'm not sure. I don't have the dates right in front of me, but the people that get assassinated, think about it. Jesus, Gandhi, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, John Lennon. I mean, really, what was core to their message? Most of them? Peace, unity, togetherness. But hey, that's just a side note, but really, isn't it curious that the ones who always get assassinated are not the individuals espousing the greatness of the state, the status quo, supporting or participating in the big corporate and political machines. It's always the outsiders all the time, the ones raging against war, against big government, against going along with the status quo. Those are the ones who die or the ones who are targeted. But there's just a side note for you. But back to our novels. Here's the thing. Orwell's 1984 beats you into submission. Huxley's Brave New World distracts you into compliance. Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. Both tactics work. And as you read these novels, you see these tactics play themselves out. And pretty much to the letter, we can see these identical tactics being deployed in various situations and in various ways across our world today. Okay, very good. So let's get to some real world context. Enough with just the pure fiction and enough with the hypotheticals here. Let's look at modern relationships right now today in the age of technology. We might not be living in a totalitarian nightmare like 84 or mind-numbing indulgence, A Brave New World, but are we really that far off? I think as you read these novels, one can quickly argue we are, at the minimum, not that far off, and in some cases we are on the same level of the dystopian worlds, and possibly it's even worse and more corrosive. So let's talk about something we've all encountered. Well, maybe you haven't encountered firsthand, but surely you've heard about it if you have anyone in the millennial or Gen Z age group. Hookup culture. Swipe left, swipe right, maybe meet up, often for nothing more than casual dates with sex. But often something is missing. Something's pretty dark here. Well, what if I told you these dating apps like Tinder and Bumble are kind of like the characters straight out of Brave New World? The sexual freedom the dating apps promote, that's straight up Huxley. You see in Brave New World, those society values of sexual freedom and life, nothing but an unending series of hookups without ever hoping for anything more. Here's the data. About 79% of people under 30 who use online dating apps have swiped on Tinder. That's a lot of potential love connections. And I use the term love connections pretty loosely here. But here's the irony, is that while we have more access to romantic possibilities than ever, the nature of these encounters tends to be extremely superficial. In fact, 62% of adults now believe that casual sex on these apps is absolutely fine. Now, I'm not here to judge, but begs the question, what happened to deep, meaningful connections? The marriage rate has plunged. The number of childbirths continue to plunge, but the hookup sex culture is thriving. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm just too old. Your ways are outdated. It's just modern dating. People can do what they want to do. And you're absolutely right. People can always do what they want to do. But here's where it gets dystopian. The commitment phobia is real. Only 44% of dating app users are looking for something medium to long term. And get this, 50 to 60% of men under 30 are on these apps for nothing more than casual sex. What does that tell us? Well, much like Huxley's world, intimacy has become a commodity. It's like they're out shopping at an emotional buffet, but never sitting down for the main course. And here's another twist, emotional detachment. Just like the citizens in Brave New World who are conditioned to avoid forming deep connections, today's culture often celebrates independence over vulnerability. Unsurprisingly, 53% of college students report feeling emotionally unfulfilled after all these casual encounters. They sense that what they're doing isn't quite right, yet they continue to do it. So while these apps give people a freedom to connect, they also create environments where true, deep relationships are becoming harder and harder to form. I mean, sounds pretty dystopian to me. Nobody knows what the future is going to hold, but if our relationship trends keep following the path of emotional intimacy that we're on, that just might become a stuff of legend, like finding a phone booth in 2024. Let's dive into how the family unit is breaking down in today's world and why we might already be living in a version of the dystopias Orwell and Huxley warned us about. Let's start with technology's role in this. Increasingly, we're seeing technology step in as the new parent. And I'm not just talking about kids glued to their iPads at dinner. Though, let's be real, we've all seen that. We've seen it in the restaurants. We've seen it out in public. What's happening is much deeper shift in how kids are raised and who or what is doing the raising. Studies are showing that children are spending more time with their screen than their families. Let me repeat that. Studies are showing that children are spending more time with screens than their families. By 2021, only 37% of Americans aged 25 to 49 were living with their spouse and children, compared to 67% in 1970. That is a cataclysmic shift in how families are structured. What's more, the rise in single-parent household means many kids are left alone with screens as a default babysitter, and screens are always on, which makes technology, not parents, the primary influence on young minds. This is dangerous. That situation mirrors Orwell's 1984, where these external forces systematically erode family bonds. Think about it. In 84, if you read through that, the children are manipulated to turn against their parents. In today's world, while we may not have thought police recruiting kids, we do have the creeping influence of algorithms, social media, video games that shape how children think and behave. And it often is replacing parent guidance, parents' norms and values. TikTok and YouTube influencers have become the surrogate parent for far too many kids. And they guide their beliefs and behaviors far more than any real life role model. In a way, I guess you could say we've outsourced family interactions to digital surrogates. But it's not just about that technology. The family union is the unit itself is shrinking. Birth rates steadily declining in the US and around the globe. In some places like Korea and Japan and China, they have utterly collapsed. And fewer kids are being raised in traditional two-parent households. In the U.S., less than 50% of children live with married parents. Families are getting smaller, but also that means the family bonds are becoming more and more fragmented because of all the divorce. In Brave New World, Huxley imagined a world where the family doesn't even exist at all. Children are grown in hatcheries, and words like mother and father, they're considered obscene. Now, we're not there yet, obviously, but we're seeing a growing trend towards artificial reproduction. Technologies like IVF, surrogacy, even experimental artificial wombs are transforming the way that families are formed. Today, in countries like Israel and Spain, 1 in 10 births are attributed to reproductive technologies. It's incredible, but it also raises questions. Just as Huxley predicted, we're moving away from the traditional intimate idea of family towards a more technological, commodified version of parenthood. All of these trends, technology raising children, declining birth rates, rise of artificial reproduction, they contribute to the family unit's fragmentation. And in many ways, we're already living in a world where traditional family connections are weak or non-existent. Often shaped by commercial forces, stepping in to fill these gaps with TikTok and YouTube and all kinds of social media. The dystopias that Orwell and Huxley imagined may not be fully realized, but when it comes to the family, the cracks are already showing. So what do we make of this? Are we okay with the idea that more kids are raised by their screens and by their parents? Or is technology reshaping what it means to even have a family? I mean, these are very tough questions, and we have to grapple with them for answers. But what's clear is that we're not as far off from what these dystopian worlds describe in the novels we're reading as you might think. Let's turn our attention to something I think a lot of us can relate: the erosion of friendships and the rise of loneliness in today's world. You might think, how in the world can we be lonely when we're more connected than ever? I mean, that was supposed to be the grand, wonderful thing of social media when that burst on the scene with Facebook. We're all going to be connected globally into one big happy family. Well, that didn't work out, did it? There is an epidemic in loneliness in our culture today. It's just a fact. Start with social media. As a side note, this invention to bring people together, it just might go down to be one of the most morally and socially destructive forces that human beings have ever invented. I mean, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they give us the impression that friends and followers surround us, have hundreds, sometimes thousands of connections. Here's the kicker: most of these connections are just plain old superficial nothingness, like the connections in Brave New World. They mean nothing. Think about it. Scrolling through profiles, liking photos, commenting with a thumbs up emoji. This is what researchers call social snacking. It's like eating junk food when you're starving. Feels an immediate need for interaction, but doesn't nourish you on a deeper or emotional level. Studies show that while technology makes communication more accessible, it often leads to shallow interactions. People who spend a lot of time on social media are more likely to feel lonely. That's right. The more we connect online, the more we feel disconnected in real life. Let me say that again. The more we connect online, the more we feel disconnected in real life. So we all got to unplug. I mean, we see the highlights of other people's lives, their vacations, their achievements, their perfect relationships, and we start to feel like, man, I'm really missing out. My life isn't so wonderfully perfect and exciting and fun all the time. This constant comparison breeds feelings of inadequacy, deepens our sense of isolation, when in fact, we don't even know if any of that's even real. Now think about how this parallels the novel 1984. In Orwell's world, real trust and friendship are almost impossible. Everyone is suspicious of everyone else because of constant surveillance. And in our world, well, it's not Big Brother watching, it's something else. It's an endless stream of curated content, social judgment from random people just out there on the internet somewhere. They judge you. If you say the wrong thing, they attack, mock, or even try and cancel you. Their likes might give you an immediate dopamine hit for a couple seconds, but still, even then, it really is quite meaningless. And it makes genuine connections harder and harder to achieve when the superficial is given so easily. And so for many, the real connections almost seem like an impossibility or something that's out there beyond their own grasp. And this leads to that loneliness epidemic. Despite being more connected than ever, 30% of Americans report feeling lonely at least one time a week. That's huge. The numbers are even higher for young people, especially between the ages of 18 to 34, where some studies even show they're pushing up to the 50th percentile of feeling lonely in a given week. That's scary. Technology was supposed to bring us together, but it's done the opposite for so many people. Instead of real-life interactions, we substitute online communication, sending memes, liking posts, DMing people. But these are often just surface-level exchanges. It's like we're talking to each other but not really connecting. It's this weird paradox where we feel more connected digitally but lonelier in the real world. The superficiality leads to a growing distrust in relationships, and social media often plays a significant role here. Think about it. How often you see cancel culture, public shaming, online call-outs. This antagonism creates an atmosphere of fear and anger, and people become more guarded from opening up and sharing their feelings and beliefs because they don't want to get attacked, as nobody, not me, not you, want to face public shame or ridicule or mocking. It's human nature, right? Still, the consequences are not worked out in person, but in a very sterilized, inhuman online chat forum or discussion board. But hey, anymore, it isn't just online, but everywhere. You know, I'm a college instructor by trade. I always have to watch my words, whether in class or out of class, and to be certain, keeping certain context and you know, the amount of conversation you could have with faculty or teachers or administrators. You always have to be careful. You always do. You have to do that in any job, but you know, in this world, you never know if something you say or do will be taken out of context and used against you. This constant judgment and surveillance sounds much like Orwell's 1984, doesn't it? Back then in that novel, it was the thought police, but now the fear of being canceled or shame makes us hesitant before trusting others and forming genuine open dialogues or relationships. It's very hard when you're constantly walking on eggshells, wondering who might be offended, upset, or might betray you. And finally, let's talk about our work. In capitalist societies are eroding friendship. In today's hyper-competitive world, career success is often prioritized over personal relationships. We work very long hours. We chase promotions and constantly try to be more productive. But at what cost? Studies show that people spend less time nurturing their friendships as work demands increased. It's not uncommon for people to say, I don't have time to hang out this weekend. I'm just too busy. I'm too busy to do anything. I'm too tired to do X, Y, or Z tonight. You know, I got home late. What happens? Friendships fade, leaving people more isolated. This is eerily similar to the world of Huxley in Brave New World, where relationships are shallow and primarily serve the state's interest. In our case, it's not always the state or necessarily the state. It's the demands of our materialistic capitalist system. And capitalism can be great, but if you don't control it, if you don't learn to keep your friendships and your relationships tight, I mean, a capitalist aggressive system like in the United States, it does not encourage individuals. It encourages that individual success at the expense of meaningful human connection. So what's happening here? We're seeing more superficial friendships, digital loneliness, distrust in relationships, less time to invest in friendships. This erosion of relationship and rise in loneliness are unsettling trends that make us wonder if the dystopian futures imagined by Orwell and Huxley are really that far off. When we talk about the loneliness epidemic and the erosion of friendship, we must ask ourselves, are we okay living in a world where our connections are so razor thin? Are we willing to let social media, work pressures replace deep, meaningful relationships? Something to consider as we navigate this increasingly digital and isolated world. Now let's talk about something that might hit a little too close to home for some of us. How we deal with our emotions, or rather, how we avoid dealing with our emotions. In both Orwell's 84 and Brave New World, Huxley's Brave New World, there's this concept of numbing the human experience, whether through surveillance, drugs, distraction. Unfortunately, when we look at what's happening today, we see some really unsettling parallels. Let's start with what I call the Soma effect in Brave New World. Soma, was that perfect drug. No side effects, no hangovers, just blissful detachment from reality. Citizens would pop a pill whenever things got rough or even mildly unpleasant, and boom, voila, within minutes, no problems, no more feelings. Sound familiar? Today we don't have Soma exactly, but we sure have a whole lot of pharmaceutical grade drugs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, let alone all the street level drugs and narcotics. While life-saving for many, these pharmaceuticals, they're being used at record rates that's hard to even imagine. And the illicit drugs to numb down life and create false happiness are as they have been for centuries, always present. Except in our world now, the drugs are not just plants, they're synthetic concoctions that are becoming more and more potent. Did you know that one in 8 adults in the US now uses some form of psychiatric medication? That's a huge number. And while these medications are critical for some people in dealing with severe issues, there's another side effect to this: emotional blunting. Nearly half, 46% of antidepressant users report feeling emotionally quote unquote numb. Sounds exactly like Soma in Brave New World. Feelings of being detached from positive and negative emotions both. You're not really experiencing the highs or the lows. You're just sort of floating along. This reminds me a lot of Huxley's version, where society's emotional highs and lows, they're just completely wiped out in the name of quote unquote stability. If you're constantly numb to life's discomforts, you're also numb to its joys. It's a trade-off. And I think we have to ask ourselves if in numbing ourselves to sadness or anxiety, we're also losing the full experience of being a human being. But it's not just medication. We live in a world of constant entertainment and materialism. I mean, constant. Netflix, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. There's no shortage of ways to distract ourselves from whatever we don't want to feel, or whatever we feel too lazy to do, or whatever we are procrastinating against. Feeling down, open up TikTok, and within 30 seconds, you'll forget what you were even sad about. But here's the thing: the endless stream of content serves a dual purpose. Sure, it can be fun, but it's also a way to avoid dealing with real emotions. Research is showing us that the digital content consumption has surged in recent years, and much of it is used as a tool for distraction. We're distracting ourselves. We're distracting ourselves from being uncomfortable, from grief, from loneliness, from anxiety, from fear, or heck, maybe it's just plain old boredom. It's not too far off from what happens in Brave New World, where citizens are distracted by these mindless pleasures. They don't have to face inner turmoil because there's always something shiny and new to keep them entertained. It's working the same way for us. We're using endless content and quick hits of dopamine to avoid self-reflection, which means we're avoiding emotional growth and the deeper connections within ourselves and getting to know others and all those things that make us human, because we don't confront those things head on anymore. And finally, there's this issue of emotional vulnerability. Today, it feels like we're constantly chasing happiness or comfort. And when something uncomfortable comes up, whether it's sadness, fear, vulnerability, our instinct is just to push it away, to avoid it, or to blame. Somebody else's fault that I didn't get this when I should have got it. Me. And while that's a perfectly human response, it has some pretty significant consequences. When we are suppressing or avoiding our emotions, we don't just avoid the pain, we block the full range of the entire experience. We start to miss out on the richness of life, the ability to connect with others, the ability to grow, because if we mess up and screw up, if we have our full mental capacity, we can grow from the experience. Think about it. If we're constantly numbing ourselves with distractions or medications or blaming someone else, are we even really living? Or are we just existing in some kind of an emotional limbo where nothing really touches us deeply, whether that's good, whether that's for better, or whether it's for worse? The avoidance of vulnerability and emotional depth mirrors the characters in Brave New World, because they steer clear of all that discomfort, resulting in a society where people are just stunted, emotionally stunted. It's not that they're unhappy. It's that they can't even feel happiness on a deep level. And that's a danger we're facing too in our world today. Because by constantly chasing comfort and avoiding hard stuff, we risk flattening out our emotional landscape to the point where we lose what makes us truly human. just like we see in our society, pills and things can numb much of our pain. So what does all that mean? We're seeing more and more people relying on medications. We're glued to our screens. We're avoiding difficult feelings with endless streams of content. We are beyond addicted to buying things and materialistic things, and we're avoiding vulnerability. We're afraid of discomfort. We don't want anything to feel bad or hard at all. And these trends reflect a society that's increasingly detached from the full range of emotional experiences. Just like in these novels, we're not in a totalitarian state or a chemically controlled utopia yet. But when it comes to how we handle our emotions, it is very easy to argue that we are there. Orwell warned us when he said, "The choice for mankind lay between freedom and happiness, and for the great bulk of mankind, happiness was better." The same can be said about us today. When we have a choice of being free or being happy, far too many people are willing to say, "You can keep your freedom, just make me happy." You hear that over and over again with different people. What do you want in life? I just want to be happy. I want to be happy. You know, that convenience trumping everything like complexity and raw and real emotions, real connections, pains and successes. That's freedom. Just being happy, that's a pretty shallow way to want to live. Thank you so much for joining me on our podcast today, Echoes of Tyranny. I hope you enjoyed discussing relationships. I don't do a whole lot of relationship stuff, but the topic today, it can be hard and painful for many. I mean, if you're going through stuff right now and you feel that your relationships are in trouble, this kind of topic's not a fun one. But if you feel your relationships are firm, we all need to have empathy for those who are stuck in depression and anxiety and just generally lonely. We don't want that for our friends, our children, our family, or anyone. So we all need to look in the mirror and see how society in this technologically dominant and consumeristic driven world can pull us all down. We all need to make a conscious effort to understand that these flashy, fluffy, nice things have a dark side. And that there are forces in our government, in the corporate world, that don't want us ever to have deep, meaningful, and fulfilling relationships with each other. You know, I hope we become more aware and we become more careful in evaluating the messaging and propaganda that surround us daily. And when we have a chance to connect with people in a deeper, more meaningful way, we'll take that step out and do that. Because you know, if we can beat back some of the control, some of the tactics, some of the divisive rhetoric, and if you in your house and then hundreds or thousands or millions stand up and reject that messaging, well, maybe someday things will slowly turn to a more normal state. At least that's the optimistic hope. I hope you enjoyed the episode today, and until the next one, stay curious, keep challenging yourself and your assumptions that will keep continuing to move you toward intellectual freedom.